this is our last session for this afternoon, and we'll talk about the orchestration of identities and customer identity management. As we said in the opening, this is an extremely interesting topic to do with risk management, compliance management, and customer knowledge, customer relations. It's really polyvalent, a versatile domain. We have three professionals, and I will let Pascal Vidal introduce our guests. Pascal, you have the floor. So, good afternoon, everyone. Well, first, thank you very much for your it is the last roundtable. I hope that will keep you interested because I think there has been very rich all day long. Just before I introduce the topic, if you have any press media with Cyril and Benoit, we said that we were going to say things frankly about this topic. So if some would be rather transparent, you would like to disseminate some messages, please validate them with me to make sure that everything is good. So my name is Pascal Vidal. I'm in charge of digital identity activities, a lot of nice things. I've got a passion for this topic, and it is my pleasure to be with the two speakers, Cyril Gonin, who is Director of Operations France for and Benoit Fuseau, who is from Casden Banque Populaire and the chairman of Clusif. So, some distinguished speakers. And as Guy was saying earlier on, we have a new topic. There's a word that is talks about the orchestration of identity fabrics. It is how do we fluidify the data, how we can improve the flow. We are a number of specialists. It's been around for several years. We're rather controlling this. We have been asked to follow the movement of the company. You want to be in the cloud, you want to be in the SaaS, you put everything in the cloud. We are asked to, how am I going to say this, to meet, and show about who has access to what, and we're opening the IS to third parties of business third parties, partners, but also third parties going to administer the infrastructure. So we have data going in all directions. So we are asking the questions: are we mastering our data? And the idea is to say, can we be fluid about this with the orchestration of identity? So we have a publisher, and this is also chairman of a major digital identity association. First of all, to introduce this topic, I would like to, Cyril, if you could maybe explain to us this concept of orchestration of identity and why we're talking about it today. So when you talk about orchestration, there are various aspects behind that. There's an idea of coordination. There's an issue with automation. And there's probably an idea of exchange and communication and visibility on processes and data exchange. So orchestration of data, of identity data, the idea is to say, for having to have great foundations, the management of identities, and also for customers and for internally for colleagues. It starts with having a good vision of the identity and ensure that the right identity data are available and made available to all systems that consume this identity data. The apps, the infrastructure for authentication and so on. So we're talking about all this because Up to now, or at least in the over the last years, there was a rather recurring approach on the use of identity to start from the process. So it was described as a series of processes such as onboarding, enrollment, onboarding, whether it's a new customer or a new colleague, and the processes of changes, mover, and so on. And then the commissions when there's departure, but it was more of a top-down approach, and we get at the end of the data, and then we realize that we had not anticipated that, and the data, identity data, is not easy to control. Benoit, maybe you could complement that. When we prepared this roundtable, as then representative, I alleged that, and actually it was a major failure of that. When we said the truth, that's the whole point of this roundtable, is that it brings value. And why did we fail? Because when we talk about process, it changes the whole chain of the company. So this IAM project is a matter of features. It's not a technical issue. When we prepared this roundtable, we talked about the quality of the data. So how do I manage between my AD and my software a reference that authenticates the file that it is the same person? Email is fine, but there are weddings, divorces, name changes, and evolution, so it's not necessarily a key that is enough. So when we launched this project and I talked to the Inclusive, I realized something that is that the vocabulary is very important. Reminding of what habitation, an account, an identity is. There might be simple words. We sometimes don't have the same vision of these two people, the integrators, who do that all day long. I'm only RSSI, and when I call a business person, what is authentication, what is all that, you think that you know, but you don't know precisely what it is. So these are basic things, and then when you start looking at processes, and then some businesses, in terms of changes in a company, any change is complex. Change management has got to be delivered. And I failed because I didn't involve the human resources. I thought it was something that was natural. It seemed so obvious. And I wanted to change the process, and and rightly so, because it was it involved more work from them. They put a lot of hurdles on that, and for the orchestration in the processes, this is the recovery of data. How do I get this from to do my review of approval, or my enrollment, or my decommissioning, because that's also a real issue. We know how to enroll people, but decommissioning accounts is regularly we find accounts that are 2 or 10-year-olds in our reference, so that's also a major issue. So when you have this data approach rather than it could have been better, or we could have onboarded HR. Well, thank you for saying this, actually, because we've changed totally. I don't talk to IAM, I do recertification. And why recertification? It doesn't change the process. You talk about the data. The quality of the data that we have in the reference repository is not right. It's not good. I mean, sometimes you have to say that. It's sometimes the issue between my AD. So I work in the bank, and then we have RACF. So it's mainframe. I mean, imagine, in this repository doesn't interact the same way as a traditional database. So this is why we've decided to ramp up the maturity on this topic of identity, is to recertify too, so we can explain, you can make people understand what the risks are, the importance of decommissioning, deactivating accounts. So this concept of starting from the data brings value, and that makes it possible to talk about a project. Why do we prepare this roundtable? At the end of the day, we didn't have this approach. See who has access, and it reminds me that we're a customer IAM, so, and then, we deploy a solution for a key account, and then we had a great, we could create, be authenticated from web and from mobiles. We were very happy. But we didn't think about the data, actually. We just wanted for the customer experience, and then we were disconnected from the physical work, like the loyalty program or after sales or CRM, and actually realized by taking a step back that not having this data as a priority. And we talked to after sales of the company when they were talking with the finance world, because there's a finance world with pay cards. Everyone had different data. They were consistent, thank God, but the customer presence was not optimal. So we tried to rethink the project, launch into an approach that would, if you enroll, what kind of information would you have? So we could, we asked a couple of customers about that. So we could, we took the data approach rather than the process approach and add value. That reminds me of another project. Sorry to be so talkative, but we had two historical solutions, I mean legacy solutions in a world. So most of them have retired, and a solution that is no longer supported by the publisher. So it's a totally different process and a totally different organization. So we said, what is the best approach? So we said, we to see what the application owner, they're rather unified. The architects, you see simple. We said that maybe we don't break everything. We're going to plug in this solution to the system to aggregate the data and let the business people to access, have reporting, and give quality data before they get into the transformation. So if you didn't have that orientation, we could have spent 4 years to do it, and we managed to do that in 18 months. So there are the return on experience. But Cyril, I have a question for you. And be frank about it. We have a lot of buzzwords, as you said, a vocabulary that is quite rich, but is the orchestration of identity just something that we used to do before? It's not a buzzword for architects to put a word behind this control of data. Well, you asked me whether this is bullshit. Well, a bit. Well, but more polite than bullshit. Okay, so we must look into beyond the marketing statement, because regardless of the publisher, the objective is that every 3 months we have a new concept to explain that you have to buy a new product. You all know what I'm talking about. But fundamentally, when you look at the technology that I implemented in the examples described by Pascal and Benoit, this is not something that has just come out on the market. These are products that have been around for some time, that have proven usefulness, and mature products that allow us to reach objectives. I think that behind the buzzwords, what the message we're trying to convey here is that to start and use the data as pivot to structure your approach and your architecture. IAM-CIAM, which is not spontaneously what you would like to do or what publishers or integrators would like you to do. So, which is not either the approach that is going to be visible. because when we talk about the quality of the data, that's really boring. But if you don't do it, then you're going to have problems later. So it's probably a strategy to develop to find quick wins, and then if we first process the data. But it is first and foremost that a strategy of rollout, of orchestration, and that can apply if you're a newcomer and you like to start and that you want to implement these IAM tools. It also works if you have more maturity, if you have an existing approach and you want to overcome some limitations. And then, honestly, what we've observed as publishers, where we are asked quite often, is that when you have an exceptional circumstance in a company, so that suddenly you have to question ourselves because we reached the limit. So I'll give you a couple of examples of mergers and acquisitions that it's a nightmare each time. And it breaks the IAM, process-oriented IAM, because everything is duplicated and so on. So starting from the data and saying that's what's important is a comprehensive vision of all users and all access from one point is going to help with the integration of a number of systems and at the end of the day, the processes. Excuse me, but the move to cloud and all these operations in which suddenly we put a payload in a cloud or several clouds, and we have several IDPs, and each cloud supplier starts from the principle that you're going to put everything there, so you'll be able to put in its repository or its, so we couldn't care less about whether it is on-prem or other locations. So these are problems that we encounter. We're going to ask the audience, and we'll have a survey. Who knows in your AD the exact number of accounts? Who knows the exact number of accounts? You're hesitating, aren't you? Why did you hesitate to raise your hand? Is that like within 10, 100, 1,000? Within 10 accounts. Okay, so 2 people. I don't know how many people in this room, but I raised my hand because I've done this work. I know exactly how many accounts there are. The first observation we made, and I invite you to do that, look at the number of accounts and the number of colleagues. That's quite funny. You will realize that it's a good indicator, and you don't need to be an engineer to understand there's an issue with identities. Talking about deactivating accounts. So now we go even further to have you participate. Some people are still looking at their telephones. So who knows the exact number of service accounts that you have in the AD? Just 1%. We've lost the second one. The others? No? Okay. A service account and then test accounts. And I could make the long list of things like that of a package. I'm the only one to say it because I made that work. I invite you to do that because the service accounts, who controls them? Do you know what they are used? All of them. These are real issues. And the quality of the data is that as well, is how do I control them? We talked earlier on about retrieving the apps. Who is responsible for the app to retrieve the information on identities? Most of the time, you don't even know. So it's a whole work upstream when you launch into this. And it's also why I'm talking about this is because in my failure, this is something I observed, that today we were not mastering data that I was using. So to agree with what Cyril said about bullshit and buzzwords or an orchestration, before doing orchestration and automation, we should know what we're talking about and do the manual process once on that. Well, thank you very much, Benoit, for these compliments. Actually, there is technology that is developing on the market and that aims at ramping up the maturity. And Cyril, I think that you may have had some rather structuring references in which your technology could help. So in certain contexts like M&A, as you were saying before, would you have current examples to give to the room to support customers?
Yes, of course. There's lots of examples. I'll take an example. It's very short, very quick. IAM. It's an insurance company that was built through acquisition of different companies, health insurance, specialized sports insurance, insuring sports clubs and home insurance, etc. And so the customer experience when you went to their portal, you had to identify yourself 4 times to get all your contracts because if you're a member of a sports club, it wasn't the same entry point than if you had home insurance or if you had health insurance through your employer. So the objective was to very simply say, okay, as of the point of a single mobile app, the customer could have all of the coverage, even if behind that there were several different contracts and several different quote-unquote identities through these contracts, it was still the same user. And so that was an example of a customer that sort of brought together a lot of different gateways through different technologies and virtualized all of that into a single directory, and so that you could have all of the consolidated data, the consolidation of all the contracts, etc., all through one mobile app. Another example in the health domain. Just something that probably going to be relatively far from what you all here might find part of your daily lives, but it's fascinating. There was a moment of huge consolidation in the hospital sector in America. They became hospitals went from not-for-profit to these HMOs, which are now different type of organizations. And there are groups that are being built through mergers and acquisitions, and they're growing at an outrageous speed. Now, for people who know something about IAM and health, quite often, when you put the two together, people start breaking out in a sweat. But security and health, it's a sector that's extremely complicated. So people sweat when they talk about security and health in the same breath. So every 3 months we integrate a new hospital of like 500,000 beds or something like that. So in these big groups, you have huge teams that are dedicated to the integration of these new mergers and acquisitions operations for all the different IT systems to make sure that there's no interruption of healthcare, of patients, etc. So you can imagine the for people who are aware of what's going on in the healthcare sector, it's really vertiginous. And so our part is to be part of the toolbox of that team, because the first concern are the two, let's say I got 2 ERPs at a minimum, I got 2 HR systems, I've got, when you're merging or acquiring a new company, you have you have 2 entire systems that need to be integrated. You have the administrative personnel, the hospital staff, the patients, all of this has to be consolidated. And it's through that process that you integrate all these different systems and IT processes. So it's huge. These are huge factories of data with spectacular different approaches, and all of this has to be done in like 3 months' time. And this was done with this toolbox. So we can see through these examples how important it is to manage and control data. Now, just to sort of summarize what we were able to say throughout this session this afternoon, the orchestration of the identification is not just a technology. It's not just technological solutions. They help, but it's above all an approach that we must all have. And we start by, even if we're a mature entity, we have to really rethink about data as a priority in our CRM approaches. And like I say, if in the future we go even further and to be really mainstream and really be part of this FIC forum here, and the idea behind this whole forum, and you might make some of the people laugh, but you have EAIA pretty much in everything it does, in recommendations for decision making. EAI that's going to all of this is based on data, identity data, authorization data, and there are other approaches, of course, that what we call the dynamic access or access control. There's lots of different names for it, but it's basically the IAM environment really is based on the identity to give an authorization to a user, to a service. And so if we don't control that, if we don't master that, we're headed for disaster. So what I recommend to you all is to integrate in your current reflections or the reflections in the future in your roadmap is to integrate data and say, where do I know who is using the data, where is it circulating, because in the future this is going to be mandatory, and as you know, the identity is the first security perimeter for the coming years. So I think that's pretty much a strong message that you have to keep in mind. Benoit, maybe you want to add a last word. You shouldn't forget that the regulations are arriving, and what you're saying here is going to really accelerate things. The IDS2 and all that is going to accelerate this, and in AI, in AI, you also got who does the query, who validates the access to the data. These are subjects that I think will be really fascinating. I have another recommendation, and that's to look at all these subjects. We have a working group. I'm going to giving you a scoop here. There's going to be a working group that's going to be headed by Cyril with Implosive, and these are two companies are both members of the Implosive, and so we have people who also can give you information on the Implosive as well. So don't hesitate. Cyril, final word. Yeah, Benoit really was able to extort from me. I'm sorry, I'm not racketing anybody. I'm a volunteer. I'm benevolent here. Okay. I withdraw. I withdraw the word. I'm happy to participate in your working group, and and anybody who wants to help out is welcome. So I got to tell you, there's no bad guys here, but I think there's really opportunity to build a scale architecture that will be ready for the future. And IAM often has a reputation of being one of those subjects for which you have more failures than successes, but it doesn't have to be that way. No, it's not. Failures are not a bad word. I mean, it's not a bad problem. We learn a lot from our failures, and one of the things is the problem, especially here in France, is that we don't learn enough from our failures. Now, there's nothing really serious, but we continue to decommission, but we have an approach, and I think we're making good progress through our failures because, especially through this, because we are able to better master accounts, to understand who understands the data, who controls the data, who has the data, and how it circulates. There's a lot of errors and failures, but we're inventing new rules for automation, for orchestration, the basics, the foundations. But I got to tell you, just decommissioning an account, I give you the challenge. Who knows your decommissioning procedures? Today, there's lots of enterprises where they don't know how to do it. And even if they don't know it, I mean, even if they do know it, quite often how it functions, I think there's still years and years of subjects in terms of the identity, and there will be new needs. I think we're very creative in our two companies, but there's always going to be new stuff coming online. So thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. We have 10 minutes maybe for questions and answers. We still have 10 minutes left for Q&A if anybody has any reactions to what's been said here today. Any questions in the room? Yes, thank you for your presentations. They're very interesting and very transparent. I have a question. With regard to the two big movements that seem to be structuring the IAM market, the first, the migration to the cloud, how is that working? Is this something that is going to improve security, or is it going to create greater threats? Are we going to lose control or mastery of? That's the first question. And the second question is, We had systems where we mastered corporate governance and systems and processes. But now, when you look, for example, at companies looking at customer relationship through IAM, so you have to have the consent for the rights to privacy laws. You have to harmonize the different channels, mobile, web, physical, brick and click, physical relationships with my customers, etc., and all this notion of orchestration. So the question is with the big companies of the general public, I might be able to imagine certain forms of synchronization with the social networks, either purely for the general public or maybe professional or, whatever. But I'd like to have your vision on those two big movements. What do you think? How do you see this?
Je me lance, c'est ça? Alors, concernant la partie cloud.
Regarding the cloud, well, the cloud is not a bad word. This is one of those things that, like for an RSSI, it gives me friction, if I can say it that way, but rubs me the wrong way. It's not a bad word, but it's important to know what you're talking about. I give classes to my students, and I explain what it is, a cloud. Okay, everybody loves clouds. They're lovely. But no, what you have to understand about clouds is when you're talking about mastery and control, how do you master or control the information that's in that environment? Now, a few years ago, there was Tristan Lito, who was one of the founders of Wooddeal, and he gave me a definition of the cloud. It's worth what it's worth, but for me, it clarified things quite a bit. He said the cloud is putting data on somebody else's computer. And I liked that definition because it really talked about the notion of the loss of control, and so to what point do I accept to lose that control? And then another point, if you don't go in that direction, then you don't get access to services that are becoming more and more essential. You see it with Office 365. You see it with mergers and acquisitions. How much time does it take to master and control the data that you're going to recover? So it's really important to see where we're headed, with what solutions we're headed, and I will repeat it, and I'll never say it enough, the contractual aspects. When you're in the cloud, never forget, how do I recover my data, and how do I leave my service provider? Because the cloud solutions, they're great, but when you start a customer relationship with your supplier, you're in an environment of confidence, of trust. But a contract actually there's no need for a contract until there's problems. And then when there's a problem, the first thing you do is you take the contract. And if you don't have the right clauses in the contract, then you can't get out. I don't want to cite any names here, but there are certain big companies where you can no longer negotiate. And I got to tell you, that really bothers me. I'm not going to mention names, but I think you all get an idea. Now there's a question. Just to add about that. Just to respond to the question, there's a big component about the cloud to have in mind, and that is that almost all companies are moving towards the cloud. You have to put the infrastructures in the cloud to close the software services situation, put them on the cloud, so we have to ask for our environments, whether they're virtual machines or databases or whatever. We're going to have a dynamic with access to data, which is not what we do traditionally in all the AirPack models for the usual traditional company ERM. And so so the question is, how do you deal with administrators in the cloud? It's something that's not even looked at, and we're starting to relook at these subjects. We're starting to take these issues more seriously. It's so you look at the cloud infrastructure management, CIAM, which is what we do with PAP and PREM, but we now do it with through the cloud. And so this is something we have to be very careful because it's part of the scope of accounts that you have to govern and control. So, second question was customer IAM. How does it allow you to better understand your customer and manage your customer accounts in the future? Can I continue? Yes. Okay, great. It's a subject that fascinates me, so I'm very happy to answer it. I have one thing that I've stated since 2018. There was a real boom of ERM solutions where we were saying that ERM is really the revolution of the year, as how you can better understand your customer, how you can better work with your customer. It's not totally true either, because maybe it might facilitate certain digital services on the web, on the mobile. You can more easily contact and interact with the customer, identify the customer with you can do anti-fraud, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not just that. It's not just capturing an identity. It's not just capturing consentment. It's better to know the customer, the type of purchase, and that's done by the customer IAM, and that the customer IAM allows you to identify the person in an ecosystem, which is very vast and diverse, and quite often they don't contact. They're not in contact. So it's very important to identify the customer and have an engine in the center that sort of orchestrates all this data to better understand the customer. It's hyper important, and that's what the experience has shown in an experience that we had lately is when you had customer IAM that helped help the digital customer transparency, but didn't help know the customer better. It does a lot of things, but it doesn't do everything. Okay, just to add to that, I don't know a lot of companies that are still outside of all of that. I think they still have logins, they have a password. We're not totally using these latest solutions. We're still stuck in the old ways, because of the quality of data of the customers. Quite often the quality of data is essential for the identity of you often have this problem with the quality of data. And so everybody wants to do this. Everybody's very, very pious about better understanding the customer, better understanding the customer behavior, better understanding the customer journey. But for me, I haven't heard many people talk about this at a level of maturity, and I think the promise is there, but we are not yet over the threshold. And so once again, when you talk about like the movement from mainframes, how do you manage this relationship all the way end to end? These are really the challenges that lie ahead. And just for a little anecdote to amuse everyone, this notion of orchestration with a probabilistic approach. So we had algorithms that said, okay, if it's this same name, same first name, same postal address, then it's the same person. That's not the identity, but it was a way to identify a unique single person. And so now, we often said when we had a rule that when we weren't good at data management, we say, let's say somebody buys a jewel, and the wife receives the invoice, but the jewel was not destined to be given to the wife. So this is the kind of thing that you see, in fact, the customer ended up wanting to sue the company because it mishandled the data. Once again, it was with an algorithm that had a failure there. It was a probabilistic algorithm and so it's very important to better understand the customer. So now we have to take into account the sex of the person. Almost, yes, almost, not quite, but yes, almost. If there's not any other questions. If there's enough time, I think we've already used up most of the time, but don't hesitate to come join us in our stands, or the exclusive is an expert club of experts that brings together cyber experts. We don't have any sponsoring. We are completely agnostic about that, but I pay the same membership fee as the two people who are here, so that's why this economic business model is very interesting, because we really provide, we walk the walk and talk the talk. We reflect on the best practices, and so it's already a guide that exists on IAM, and you can find it on available free of charge on the exclusive site. And the idea of this document is to initiate best practice if you want to launch an IAM solution. And so I was one of the contributors. I was quite proud of it. And I said, no, I thought to myself I wasn't going to make a mess of it, but unfortunately I'm afraid I did make a mess of it. And so that's why I'm extremely happy, and I'm going to repeat it, that Cyril is going to take over this topic for me, and because I think he's going to do a great job. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye.